Feeling overwhelmed? Searching for someone who truly gets it? At J. Branch and Associates, we provide mental health support for BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and others facing unique challenges. We understand the weight of generational trauma, the struggles of identity, and the pressures of being a part of an underestimated and overlooked group. At J. Branch and Associates, therapy isn't a one-size-fits-all. We create a safe, culturally aware space where you can feel seen, heard, and understood. Finding a therapist who truly fits you matters, and that's exactly what we're here for. Our team of highly trained licensed therapists bring compassion, empathy, and real-world experience to help you on your journey to healing and growth. We're committed to helping you become the best version of yourself. Ready to take the next step? Visit us at www.drjbranch.com for more information, or call or text 404-436-2540 to schedule your free 15-minute consultation. You can also book your first session today. Thank you for choosing J. Branch and Associates, therapists of color providing exceptional care to BIPOC communities, quality service, exceptional care from authentic professionals.
Three parallels. Yeah. Three parallels. Yeah. Three parallels.
Three Parallel Podcast. Come take this walk with me.
Hello. Welcome back. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good day, good weekend, good whatever it is when you're listening. Welcome back to the Three Parallels Podcast with your host, Dr. Jason Branch, where we discover who we were, embrace who we are, and work towards becoming the best version of ourselves possible. Today's guest, I consider family. Family, and as y'all know, with family, I love bringing my family on because my family likes to cut up. They like to show out. They like to be who they are. And this particular person that I'm bringing on the show today, I got to share the story. His name is Dr. Anwar Uhuru, and we met several years ago during our journey that crossed paths in New Jersey at this institution that will remain nameless until we decide to put a name on it. So at this institution, there were only 3 Black men. If I'm not mistaken, he was the 4th to join the institution in a different department. So it was an automatic connection of, oh, hey, I heard there's another Black man on campus. Let's go find out who he is. So I reached out, introduced myself, just wanted to connect him, make him feel welcome, and bring him into this community, although it was only 4 of us in the entire institution. Oh, man, I'm going back. So not to go too far, but the connection was instant. It was energy. It was family. It was familial. And it was just on this next level, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and mentally, that never left. So we remain connected even after our transition away from that institution. And now I want to give you all the opportunity to experience in real time what I've experienced for these past several years, just by somebody who radiates joy, love, laughter, energy, connection, ancestry, scholarship. Just this guy is everything and some. I'm telling y'all what I know, not what I heard. And as I mentioned with family, I don't know what he's going to give y'all today, but I guarantee you your life will change based off of what you hear from this conversation today. So without further ado, I would like to bring to you all, it's a pleasure to have Dr. Anwar Uhuru on the show. Welcome to the show, baby.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited. So we just going to dive in.
Okay.
So
All
where
right.
you been? How you doing? How you living? What's the latest? Catch me up to speed.
Oh man, we need like hours. No, I'm just kidding.
Listen, we just
Or a
gonna let
bar
her.
counter or something. Some nice like neo soul playing in the background. Really
Ooh,
think right.
you setting the
Um,
stone. You setting the standard. I'm loving
so
it.
yeah, since my stint on the East Coast, which I had been on the East Coast since I was like what 22, so like or so, no 24-ish.
Mhm.
So literally my 20s, my 30s, and the last months before my 40th birthday, I spent on the East Coast. So that was a huge formation. And now I'm back in my hometown of Detroit, Michigan at Wayne State University. And I'm in philosophy and African American studies and affiliations with gender sexuality and women's studies. So all the things I do have integrated in a healthy way as opposed to being spread out or dumped on like some institutions do, because you become the person that can do everything, but you're not being compensated.
Ooh, come on. Hold on. Time out. Time, time out.
Yeah, money is
Listen.
great too, but sometimes it's just the time that I want off, right? So,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Time out.
yeah,
Listen, I told
yeah.
y'all. We just started. We're not even 2 minutes in. I already told y'all what the deal was. Listen, I need you all to grab your Gator Scales journal, get your journal out, and start writing down these gems. He's hitting you with stuff. It may hit now, it may hit later, but this is information that can change your life. Understanding your values, and that's what he's sharing. His value. He values the time more than money, because time, in my humble opinion, is a lot more valuable than money, but it depends on who you ask. So
Yeah.
continue.
Right on. Of course, what is it? Nelnet, it was Sally Mae would disagree. Visa and Amex would disagree. Probably take out another credit card, it's gonna disagree. My card note, all the things we have to pay.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that is exactly my belief, because the only thing, if I ever have any regrets, is looking back on not having the time, or not just saying forget that and doing the thing.
Mm,
Using My logic was very, very controlled by capitalism.
mm,
And meaning, like, what's the productivity, what's the value in this? And it's like, no, last night my partner and I, we went to go see Erykah Badu spin, with
yeah.
a tribute. That was way more important than the article or whatever I was supposed to work on, because it'll get done when it gets done.
Mm-hmm.
And then prior to that, my partner and I went to go see Kate Trinata. So like that was like, and it was beautiful because it was in the outside amphitheater. So we were like, oh gosh, this is like the last outdoor thing, because it's cold today.
Yeah.
And part of it may be the effects of the hurricane that's about to hit Florida, but also it's October.
Mhm,
So yeah, so my experience of being not just a Black man from Detroit, raised by working class UAW folks and social workers and so on, is just we're covertly and overtly taught that we should be so happy to be invited or asked to. And it's like we get to sit at the table, but we forget to ask someone to pass the bread and the food, because we're just
mhm,
so inundated with being at the table and the weight of being at the table. Especially as you mentioned prior, we were one of four Black American men in the entire university, as opposed to being just yet another Black person in a very diverse state like New Jersey.
mhm,
So those are things I've learned, and the things I value at my now home, my job home. My colleagues are very supportive. I have the resources, and it's physically in the city. It's not 40 minutes from the city, an hour from the city, 2 hours in the case of our former institution, whose name I won't name. Why? Uh, so those are my immediate things, and I am happy to go to work and
mm,
feels when I go to work. I don't have that dread of like the preparation to physically be in
yeah.
that space and place like I did prior at my prior institutions. And I know how to advocate for myself in a way that I know it'll be heard as opposed to gaslit.
Mm,
Um, and moving back home is a different set of everything too,
yeah.
because one, how was home when you left? How was home when you visited? Now,
Ooh,
how was home now that you're coming back? So those
ooh, top. Ooh. Anwar, I told you. Oh, I told you. I told you. I told y'all, to the listeners, I told y'all what's going to happen. Okay. He just talked about three parallels. You just mentioned three parallels going home. That's what this show
Mhm.
is about. Those are
Yeah.
three different environments when you go home. So I would love if you could share those three experiences and your ability to see them. Because a lot of people that go home, that leave, they don't see those three parallels, but you see them clear as day. So if you could share that with the listeners, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a cultural taboo as being a Black American that we don't discuss our problems, and therapy is for people who are severely ill. That is the mentality I was raised with. That was a habitash. Therapy was seen as a form of punishment, or you'll have an elder in the family like, well, if you got a problem, tell me. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that, because that's grounds for confrontation. And I
That's
don't do
deep.
confrontation. It's the
Mm-mm.
loudest I'll get. Even though hearing a lot of noise, and so I made it part of my practice to not yell and not have
Mm.
to assert myself in a loud way. Because one, it physically hurts, and two, it works me up in ways I don't. So having done that work, when I left home, and had to leave home for various reasons, politically, it just was not vibing. And I needed my loved ones to have some distance and space so I can grow and reach what I needed to reach and do some healing work, not only from my journey up until that point of leaving home, but just all the other ancestral stuff and go away and venture out. So when I did that time away, which was about 15 years, um, I did a lot of growth and I was able to shamelessly take risks and focus on me and pour into me and do some couch time and deal with whatever traumas and suppressedness I had going on, but also put value back into myself in ways that it hadn't been put there. And that's a work in progress. And it'll take much longer to get completely there, but I think I'm pretty close for the most part. And I'd have people around me who remind me of me too, which was very different beforehand. So when I got back home, I was saying goodbye to the life I had formed for those 15 years. And I left in my 20s and spent my 30s on the East Coast. And then literally months before my 40th, I come back home. And then I had a lot of confrontation with self. As like, are these my dreams and goals or expectations, or are these socially projected on, i.e., the house with the mortgage and the things that are supposed to mark our success? But what I quickly realized was my markers of success is just being here in real time,
Mhm.
because I know I was personally impacted by the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Here it is, just a Black man just going for a run, which is supposed to be one of the healthiest forms of self-care. And
Mhm.
subsequently, I actually took up running, and on the 20th, I'll be running my first marathon.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yes.
And at first, for years, I used to think people who ran were special, air quotes. But adopting a dog and her energy, she required a lot of walking and some jogs. And then I was like, oh, this actually feels better. And due to some roadblocks I got in the last year or so, just applying for things and not getting them. And I was just like, oh. And then instead of me internalizing it, I would just go for a run. And then by the second or third mile, depending on the distance, I'd be like, what was I even phased about? And I even find myself driving now, and somebody will do something silly like merge incorrectly or just the things or not paying attention. I just be like, oh, they didn't hit the car. We're good. And then crank the radio right back up to what it was on. So that journey of home, and home is a metaphor, because it begins within ourselves, and then that way you can then subsequently build it with someone if that's your choice, or build community, or whatever those amalgamations of connectivity are. So that was my aha moment of physically coming back to home is realizing the home I built in myself and the one I'm forming with community. And like I said, since then, I've been back since 2022. So this is my third academic year at Wayne State, and things are looking very well in that regard. And I'm able to have the space to really think about my work, but also the work I want to do, and not just the strictures of the academy. So being able to really collaborate with people in the community and seeing how their activism and art and intellectual pursuits are like integrated and not separate, which tends to be in a lot of institutions, or I'm not seeing it just as a check on a CV or fiscal compensation, but like, what will it mean for a 12-year-old who will one day be a 22-year-old feel when they see murals on the sides of buildings, or talk face to face with a poet or an intellectual and realize those worlds aren't far removed, but they're right there. So that's the things I've been able to really grapple with. And I've just been inundated with just so much support since I've been here. And also having a very healthy, productive, beautiful relationship with my partner too. So that like downtime, we can literally just sit in silence and be just great with that. So
Mhm.
so that's where I am. and what I've been up to since we used to literally see each other on campus
Yeah.
or by the ocean sometimes.
Yes.
We both go for walks on the ocean. So yeah, that's what I've been
Yes.
up to. Yeah, all that and a pandemic later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we connected before the pandemic and even during the
Mhm.
pandemic, things started to change for both of
Oh
us
my goodness. When I
in
tell
different
you,
ways.
yeah, so many ways. I mean, some felt hard and harsh and cruel, but the way in which I kind of like phoenix from that, because it really made me confront things that I was putting aside or dissolving or filling with external stuff.
Yeah.
So it really
Yeah.
made me do some deep diving. Yeah.
Ooh, wee. Oh man,
Yeah.
this
I can smile about it now.
no, and we're gonna discuss as much
Yeah,
as
yeah,
you
yeah.
want with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a few questions based off of what you shared. I appreciate you catching us up to speed because
Mm-hmm.
this is a part of the journey. And you shared so much because
Mm-hmm.
this is your life. This is what you live. This is where you are now. And all the work that it took for you to get here. There's so many people that haven't stepped into the places that you've gone or been. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, what you're sharing are the results of the work that you've done on yourself. Like you said, your
Mm-hmm.
house. And for the listeners, for many of you, you haven't started doing the work on the house. You're doing all the things on the outside of the house, making it pretty,
Mm-hmm.
but the
Yeah.
work on the inside is exactly what you're sharing to how you got here. So I'm curious. A couple of things came up for me during that connection. The
Mm-hmm.
first, so two questions. The first, you mentioned about as a black male, preparing yourself as a black man, preparing yourself to go into these places where you were
Mm-hmm.
before. That's the first thing. Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
that? What is that life like? Because a lot of people don't know unless they're black men in these environments. So many people don't know. That's the first. And then the second, you mentioned about ancestral trauma or
Mm-hmm.
ancestral experiences. If you could talk more about both of those, and we can go as
Sure.
far as you want. And when
Mm-hmm.
we go deep on this show, when we go deep for all the listeners, for the newbies, when we go deep, that means we're going in the basement because everything talks to about the home. So you're again, we're just this kinetic energy. I look at us as people as a house, and there's three levels, three layers to the house. You got the attic, the living
Mm-hmm.
room, and the basement. When we go deep, that's that emotional work. That's the basement. When we just chilling, hanging out, having a good time, we're in the living room. You take your shoes off, socks off, rub them feet together, and watch TV. The attic is the nicest place in your house. I mean, it got Basquiat on the wall, Picasso. You got a wine cabinet, a bar. It's nice. It's pristine. And there's only enough room for you because ain't nobody else in there but the people you invite.
Mm-hmm.
And that attic is actually your mind. So we
Mm-hmm.
spend so much time in our head. That's why it looks so nice. But imagine if we had all three layers that looks as great collectively. So the
Mm-hmm.
basement, we finna go there already. So let's
All
go.
right. So yeah, so ironically, and I didn't realize until I looked at the calendar, my partner and I last night watched finally was on our watch list, the American Society for Magical Negroes.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah.
And so and also we went to see American Fiction when it was in the theater. So those two films are like great examples of like the gymnastics and preparations Black men in particular have to perform because unfortunately Black women or more femme presenting folk who are arguably on the queer spectrum uh, are seen as nurturing and these mother-like figures or a nanny, historically we would say mammy, type figures. And so if you notice in film and television, a queer person will automatically be relegated to the friend zone or the nurturer, the supporter zone, and a Black woman will, especially if a Black woman is voluptuous, if she's very attractive and Hollywood built, then she'd be considered the sex object. So for Black men, you have three categories: violent, stud, or this Uncle Tom character. And so, unfortunately, to not be seen as sexual at the workplace or aggressive, then you have to be in this kind of like Tomish character or this supportive character. So we have to constantly watch our tones, our gestures, be hyper professional appearing when we go to work. Even when they say dress casual, we're not dress casual. We're still in a pressed shirt, it's tucked in chinos. We won't even wear jeans,
Yes,
right?
indeed. Yes,
Even if
indeed.
it's a field day, we might wear sneakers, but they're dark. Like we still have this like hyper. attention to presentation, even like facial hair, like, ooh, do I need to shave? Or, um, and all that hyper curation because we don't want to be read as not taking it seriously or not being agreeable or collegial, or always just this hyper professionalism and this hyper self-policing before we get policed.
Yeah.
So all that preparation. So if you start work at 10 o'clock, you're up by 6:37 to lay your clothes out, downward dog stretch, workout if you need to, lay everything out, triple
Yes.
check your notes, all of this stuff before you get in the car or however you get to work. And then the meditation that you have to be like, okay, we're just going to work. It's only for a couple hours. We can do this. We're fine. We only had 4 hours of sleep or whatever the reality is. And just remember to speak, remember to do this, all these things. And that is our constant script, not to mention the microaggressions we may encounter with being misidentified as a janitor or anything, and we're wearing suits 9 times out of 10, with or without a tie, still a suit. So all of that gymnastics, and then if you have the audacity to do anything culturally connected to your identity, then there's an apology before you present the material in order to make those in power, mostly white folks, feel okay, or not, that you're not blaming them. If we're talking about Frederick Douglass, you're not blaming them for slavery. Or if we're talking about notes in the Birmingham jail, you're not blaming them for the civil rights movement. Or if you're talking about Trayvon Martin or whatever, you're not blaming them for police brutality. So it's this apology
Yeah.
in shrinking before you even do what you're asked to do. And then you have to be the expert in your world and the expert in their world
Wow.
and make them feel better about their discomfort with having to deal with the P word, privilege. So
Mm.
that's part of the gymnastics we have to do. And that's just professionally. God bless you if you have friends, or colleagues who are trying to be your friend, or you get assigned mentor wise, or any prospects of romanticness. All of this constantly goes on and on and on and on. And that's just from a black white binary. It also happens from your own community
Absolutely.
because they're constantly questioning your blackness and questioning your masculinity or your I heard this line said, the author's name is escaping me. He just won a MacArthur. He said he wrote this novel because he wanted to explore radical tenderness. And we don't get to do that
Yeah.
often. I think one of the examples of radical tenderness is a movie that Kevin Hart made where he lost his partner and he has to raise his daughter. Like that was one example of like radical tenderness, and asking for help, that we see, and we're starting to see it, but we don't get to enter radically tender. We're already boxed in as something else. And I remember being so good at that shrinking to where it wasn't until I physically stood up and people go like, I didn't realize you were that tall. Right. So like that ability to appear very Jiminy Cricket size, even though I'm over 6 feet tall, is one of those examples of having to prepare before I enter a space.
Oh man.
Um,
Oh
yeah.
man. You
Yeah.
said that so eloquently, and you're a great storyteller. You're a
Mm,
phenomenal storyteller, and I love the how you connect the dots. And for the listeners, I think it's really important because what was shared is there's a lot of dots that we connect, but the reality is you have to connect all the dots, not just the ones you like.
yeah.
And what you're sharing is all the dots for
Mhm.
us as black men when we're navigating these different spaces, especially within academia, because the story oftentimes is the same. It's just us. It's I am the only one. There's a couple of us. And how
Mhm.
is that the case across the country?
Yeah.
Um, it's a question that we already know the answer to, but we don't want to accept because that's part of the dots that we don't want to connect.
Yeah.
And I really value this podcast because I'm choosing for us to begin connecting all the dots. And I want to share how I related to what you were saying because you put words to what I experienced and I couldn't
Mhm.
describe. So the best way I describe it is this happened during the time I was on the East Coast as well, and I was actually this was many few years ago before I got married, way before I got married. So I was dating, I was all over the place. So I was in New York dating this woman in New York. She was in the entertainment industry, and I had the opportunity to go to the Apollo Theater. And I was there backstage. I'm rubbing the rock, like the wood, like it was an experience for me, and it was a black experience for me, as you know, Apollo Theater in the heart of Harlem. And I'm there, and I felt out of place. And I felt out of place because I had a button down shirt on. I had exactly what you described, the chinos, button down shirt, belt in, not recognizing that this has been my appearance for so long because I'm navigating these spaces. When I was in the place where I could just relax and be black, I couldn't even do that. I couldn't even do that. And I felt out of place with my own people. And they looking at me like, where you finna go? What you finna do? You finna teach a lecture? What's happening? I'm at the Apollo Theater. I could have been fine with t-shirts and jeans, but that was my lived experience, which is what you described. We do it so much, we don't even think about it. So even in the environment that I'm going in where I can be authentically me, I was so accustomed to wearing the mask and wearing a button-down shirt because my belief was this what makes me look less threatening. And it's exactly what you're sharing. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that perspective.
Ironically, you just called me out or in because I think of the last time I was in the Apollo, and there's a photograph of my mom and I because they were visiting because I was getting hooded for my PhD. And I recall the photograph now. My right before I locked my hair, I had just cornrows and I had it cornrowed in a bun. And I had on a polo shirt tucked into some navy blue chinos and a cardigan on top. So yeah, even though and everybody else is, wearing, Vans and Chucks or whatever they were wearing, but I was just like, yeah, because that is that aesthetic that one wears because of the spaces we're constantly entering and exiting.
Mhm.
And there's an unfortunate like see me so you can see me-ness that
Right.
we have to perform. And again, I'm the tallest in my immediate family, so there's also that disarming that that appearance had to do. Or it's like, well, the hair gives a little sense of hipness, but also there's a tameness and a bridleness. So yeah, I completely 110% understand it. And then if we flip it, what Cornel West says, he dresses in the suit because he's preparing for his funeral, he says, because of the work he
Mhm.
does. So at least when they find him, he said he'll look good. So
Oh,
there's that
we.
duality
Yeah.
of appearance, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of unpacking. And so whether you are fitted cap, jeans, t-shirt, or a hoodie and some Timbs, or the chinos, the loafer, and a button down. Like these are things we have to do in order to be seen as a human first instead of a thing.
Wow.
Or
Wow.
yeah. So
Absolutely. We live that parallel universe. And I think a
mhm,
lot of black men, especially a lot of black men in higher education,
mhm.
academia, or just different spaces where um, it's it's dominated by white people. It's like
Yeah.
we have to adjust in order to be safe, in order to be perceived as safe. And like you said, the mental gymnastics, there's so many different gymnastics that we're playing at that time. And what happened for me through that Apollo experience was liberation, where I had to decide this doesn't work for me anymore. And it was at that moment that I was there when I left the Apollo. And I mean, all eyes were on me and I didn't understand why. And it was because of my appearance, where, they were looking at me like, who is this guy? You must be somebody because you're not dressed like everybody else. And it was me recognizing that I was dressing for safety instead of dressing for comfort. And once that happened, that experience shifted my attire and appearance where I start dressing more for comfort and for the culture, for the community, for me. And now even in the classroom, I for the first time in my career, I wore jeans, I wore shorts, I wore Jordans, I wore things that we would never wear in these spaces because of exactly what you're talking about. So now I'm liberated because I don't care what I wear anymore because of who I am. And I can't control or change what people perceive about me based off of their own beliefs and their lived experience. So I decided to start living for me. So on average, when people see me in the classroom, my students are like, this is different, but I like it because it's authentic. And then when people see me in the hallways, it's like, this is different. he may be a student. He must be a student because only students are allowed, and I air quote, to dress this way. And that way is of comfort. So I'm so glad this came up because we're not the only two. We're not the only ones that deal with this. And for the listeners who deal with this, understand that we get to decide every single day. We get to decide. So I want to encourage, I want to empower, I want to inspire you all to take these stories, take what you're hearing and apply it to your life based off of what works for you. Now, don't get fired trying to be me, okay? Do not get fired trying to be me or Dr. Ruhu. Listen, we built for this and we worked really hard to get here. So you have to be built for it as well. Don't jump out here before you get ready. At least put a toe in the pool. So moving to the next thing, I am curious. Like a couple more things you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Integrated, separated was one thing. I want to dive into that, and then your ability to establish and maintain a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
How? Like, whoa! This. Let's talk about
Okay, if I were to put money on this, I would have lost money.
it.
'Cause yeah. So yeah, so like I mentioned too, when you do the work of really sitting with all the things that make you you, the good, the bad, and the trifling, you parse that
Hold on,
out.
time out. Listen, y'all getting hit in the head with a honey bun right now. Y'all getting bust upside the head. Write this down. Could you give those three one more time?
The good, the bad, and the downright trifling. So being human, I had some trifling traits. Let's just start
Mm,
there. I had some
mm,
trifling traits. I know because I hadn't done all the work with me yet, I was attracting and welcoming people who only saw me certain ways, and that which then sparked me to be trifling. So relationships being very transactional, whether they're romantic or platonic or whatever, um, not gravitating towards a person who would actually be a healthy partner, but someone who had a little edge and
mm.
a little ooh. And it wasn't that I wanted to fix them, it was that they had a flaw. So therefore they seemed more human as opposed to no, that's not a flaw. That's a burgundy flag. Um, now why did you do that? And you're like, oh,
Mm,
why? Let's go
yeah.
back to that time when I was 8, or let's go
Wow.
back to that expectation and no one came to this or that, or having to fix everything or having the answer to it when I just approached the problem. I didn't even get to sit and tease out which order do I go of operation. It was like, I got to solve it because
Yeah.
that was the cards I was dealt. So I had to really work on that and also dealing with the idea of what does happiness and success looks like because you're so used to trauma and failure.
Mm, mm.
So that was a huge like, ooh, we got to sit down with ourselves, be mad at ourselves, and cuss ourselves out a couple times, but more importantly, forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
And then, bad perhaps could be bad for someone else and great for someone else. And really, what I thought was bad was just my authentic self and
Mm,
being comfortable with it and demanding respect.
mm.
And then the good is this the ego and the super ego, oftentimes which you want to focus on. So just dealing with those three aspects within myself freed me up to how I show up in all aspects. And then that goes into demanding that I don't want to be this over here and that over there. If you get to talk about your job and your coworkers, you got to hear about my job and my coworkers. I'll tell you what I legally can tell you, but that would show up in various forms of relationships and integrations with folks too, where I would get gaslit about like, you're just a professor and an academic. It's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute.
Mhm.
You asked my opinion about this song or this film, like you thought I was just gonna say it was okay or it wasn't. Got it. But here it is. Everything about you revolves around your blank. Um, so I had to demand that of myself and others. And then that just freed me up to really look at what I did and didn't want professionally and personally. And so when it came time, I just thought I was going to be happily single and have certain situation setups and be great with that, because that is unfortunately the norm in academe. Because one, it's ego based, so a lot of people want their ego stroked and
Yes.
fed,
Yes.
or people can't quote unquote handle the demands of someone in academia or a more public facing profession, and because we're not 9 to 5.
Mhm.
In a perfect world, we would be, but it's often ongoing, 6.5 days per week. Even when I am at a concert or looking at an exhibition, it's when the sentences and words form very clearly and concisely on a concept I'm thinking through. And of course, as a person who works in thought and theory and philosophy, that happens all the time. And so I just put it out there as to what I wouldn't accept from myself or from someone else. And then lo and behold, this person comes along who is in the same space, and my partner is a very talented artist. And we just met. And I was just like, hey, this is my life. And my partner said, same. As a matter of
Mm.
fact, I'm preparing for a show all on the other side of the country. And I was like, okay, cool. So you got
Mm.
things to do in business.
Yeah.
And we don't mind kicking each other out so we can work on our work, right? So that was so like I felt so fed, and we can talk about anything, whether we're talking about, as you mentioned prior, Basquiat or Bakhtin in my case, or some thinker, or just like, so do you want tacos or do you want a burrito? Like we can go from there, or I could tell you've been really, really busy. Have you eaten? Come here, lay on me, or me lay on you, and just have that vulnerability with each other. And my house could be a mess, like piles everywhere, because it's just been that kind of week, and it does not register. And it's like, when you're ready, let me know. Or one time, my partner was away for a gig and had me stop by his place. And I looked, and so I just went ahead and washed the dishes. And so when he got back, he was like, I knew you were going to do that. I just knew you were gonna-" I was like, well, I know how I would feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and I know you were trying to make that flight at like 8 in the morning. I get it. It's fine. So just that ability to hold space for each other, remind each other to forgive ourselves for what we couldn't accomplish, because we know you tackled 7 things, you got 17 more left. um, and just being so honest with each other about where we are and how we feel. And that feeling means telling the other person how much they impact you. And that
Mhm.
was something radically different I've done in this relationship that I haven't done in others. I always felt like there had to be a benchmark, or there had to be enough data, or I had to feel that spark. But with this person in particular, it's there, and I don't mind saying it at
Mm.
all. I breathe deeper after I say it. I
Yeah.
feel more affirmed, in how he receives that. That's on him, or vice versa. Yeah,
Come on, healthy boundaries. Come on,
yeah.
healthy boundaries.
I gotta live with that. And
Yeah.
sometimes, I tell anybody it's okay to ask, how do I make you feel?
Mhm.
What is
Mhm.
it about me?
Mhm.
Sometimes it may be having to talk to the inner critic, or the insensitivity monster may appear, whatever it is. But I think that's healthy to ask, because we have these invisible expectations of ourselves and each other, but it's just like, hey, how do I, or are you okay, or do I make you happy?
Mhm.
And realistically, what does that look like?
Yeah.
So those are ways that I know we check in with each other, and I check in with myself. And like I said, I can be vulnerable and not my 100%. And even sometimes he'll say it, and I said, sweetheart, your 20% is most people's 120%. So
Mhm.
like, it's okay to be at 20 today.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
tomorrow or next week, I might be at 20 or 15, So like, so that's, I believe, why it's working so well. And we're approaching a year, and the amount of benchmarks we've met. And when you're good and grown and cut to the mustard,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's how we're able to do it. And just like I said, hold space for one another, check in with each other. Um, and one practice he started, and I think it's so dope, is he'll ask like, "How do you need me to show up this week?" Um, and I'll say it, and vice versa. And that's one of the ways that we support each other. Or what are you looking forward to? Is this second question he started, and that's been part of our practice. And we'll say it. And what roadblocks or difficulties you encountered. And we just hold space for one another. And that's just been that. So communication, all caps, bold, italicized is really what does it.
Mm.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
man.
that. Yeah.
That's powerful. It's so powerful. I appreciate you
Mhm.
sharing your authentic self, sharing your truth, sharing your experience within relationships, and being intimate with the listeners, being intimate with me. Like this is a we don't talk about this stuff. We just don't
Mhm.
typically allow people in. It's like, yeah, I'm in this relationship and whatever you see, that's what it is. But the
Yeah,
reality
yeah, yeah, and I was, growing up, I didn't get complex dimensions of relationships. If they were out there, they're probably acts of fiction or distant folk. But yeah, I don't recall seeing enough of this that dialogue with one another or being like, what really is it that kept Nana and Papa together so long?
Yeah,
Besides,
yeah.
two is better than one, but like,
Uh-huh.
what was it? And oftentimes we don't get that until one has departed
Yeah.
or one is in a state of illness to where they are forced to recount in a way because that's their way of processing and getting prepared to say goodbye if they
Mhm.
haven't already. But yeah, we don't get that like mundane thing of like, what is it that like you found them at whatever age it is, and then 30, 40 years later, it's still a thing.
Yeah.
Or, heteronormative or queer or various forms of relationships, because there's tons of them out there. Like, what keeps it together?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's so powerful. That's so powerful. To the listeners, I hope y'all paying attention. I hope you are. If you're not, this is an opportunity to do things different. And I'm hearing a lot of the work. Like you've done so much work, internal, external, but the work, is focused on you. And that's what allowed a lot of things around you, people, places, and things to change because you've changed. It's powerful. Powerful. So I want to switch gears for a moment because we was in the basement. We was actually in your bedroom. So now we leave. So
Well, it
now
depends on how the furnace is laid out. It's a quick connection to the basement, right?
so I want to switch gears and talk about something before we go into the rapid questions. Something else that you and I connected on is
Mhm,
this empathic ability, empathic understanding and healing. And
mhm,
how was your journey of self discovery, learning about being an empath, and then just navigating the world differently because of this gift, because of this ability. And for a lot of those who may not be familiar, this is an opportunity to learn about it. But being an empathic or being an empath is a way of life that you're born. You're born as an empath. And a lot of times we don't know it. We don't discover it until later, if at all. And I didn't discover that I was an empath until my partner, until Mia came along. When Mia came along, she was like, "Yeah, you're an empath." I'm like, "What the hell is that? I ain't eat nothing. What do you what do you mean?" I had no idea what it was and what it meant until she introduced me to it, and then it just opened up a door for another world I didn't know existed. So it seems like you've always known, or you just advanced in it, where you navigate the world differently because of your gift. So if you could, share with the listeners that experience and your truth related to being an empath in this world.
Yeah, I think yeah, ever since I can remember, I've always just like felt and processed things deeper and differently than most folks around me. And of course, when you're the firstborn, you take in the world differently than the second and even the baby. um, because you have to map out things, especially, having my mom was very young when she had me. She literally just 30 days past her 18th birthday. So I was around various folk because she had to work or whatever. So being around aunts and grandparents, etc., and being talked to and treated in a way of you got this intergenerationalness, so you have to observe behaviors even before you begin to speak, and then once you begin to speak, and being kind of let in on things because you just listen as a child, not really supposed to respond. And then of course the environment of having to take in so much, growing up in the city and being cautious and all of those things that you're trained to be, you just learn to assess and read things on a whim. And 99.99% of the time, it's accurate. The gut will tell you, and then the other things will follow. So that's how I knew I had a thing. And as one of my dear friends, she calls it, I have the lighthouse thing because I just truly don't enter people with in a position of judgment. I just want to hear you.
Yeah.
So if someone says, "Hey, can I talk to you about it?" I just say, "Sure," and they're like, really? And I'm like, after telling me whatever, and I'm like, sure, what's the problem? They're like, but you don't, oh, you mean I don't have a value judgment on you or an opinion,
Mm, mm,
because I don't want that on me.
yeah.
And oftentimes I know, especially when we whittle it down to race, and gender, no one's heard us.
Mm,
And so that's another space of empathic unfolding. And of course, then the research and all the things I've gone into was just the sense of feeling one has to have to read case studies, whether it's from enslavement or the civil rights era or in the last 20 or 30 years. Like oftentimes these stories are based on the fact that they had one person to listen and to try to feel. And so that is what's like motivated me to keep doing what I'm doing. And recently, last spring, I completed an end of life doula training with the University of Vermont. So that was
mm,
another level of like getting in touch with that empathicness. So I'm constantly reminded of people who aren't here anymore, whether it's relatives or loved ones or intellectuals whose work I look forward to. And in coinciding with, but just the markers of time, we've lost so many like pivotal figures in our community. I mean, to have a strong dad figure, I think of John Amos and James Earl Jones, right? And now they're both now they're ancestors. So just that ability to feel, and here it is, they're on a screen and they
mhm,
were able to really conjure emotions. And some of it was because I didn't have those things, but I knew they existed.
yeah.
So that's what it is. And so for me to be an empath is even if you don't see those immediate things or get to experience them, there's a part of you that know it still exists.
Mhm,
So to have healthy friends and relationships and communities, even though I may have not have had those for such a chunk of my life, part of me still knew it was out there because I still had the ability to feel it and imagine beyond it. So I think really to be an empath is just the ability to imagine beyond one's conditions is really it.
mm. Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful. Powerful. Man, dropping gems, nuggets. Whew. All right. So we're gonna transition again. And I'm definitely gonna have you back. I gotta have you back because in the life doula, like what? We gotta talk
Yeah.
about it. We gotta talk about it. So
Yeah, just a quick blurb. It was really because for years I've been told that people can talk to me about anything, and I was like, okay, sure. So let's, process, let's walk through it, etc. But due to the number of elders in my immediate family and supporting community, I was just like, oh, there needs to be someone who holds that space. And I'm willing to go down corridors most don't. And I'm not in it for fiscal gain per se. It's just I think it's a need for our community in particular.
mm,
Um, yeah. So that's
wow.
why I did it.
Yeah. Oh
Mhm.
man. Yeah. I want to dedicate some time to that because that's a
Yeah, sure.
whole,
But that was just a
oh,
quick like why.
yeah, yeah,
Why would you want to do that? Yeah.
yeah. I love it. I love it. I'm here for it. So
Mhm.
some rapid fire questions before you get out
Sure.
of here.
Mhm.
How would you describe or how do you practice self-care? How do you take care of you?
Oh, I'm fortunate to have a bathtub large enough for my long body to fit in.
So it sounds like you're doing well. You're
Yeah,
doing
so I
well over
try.
there.
Yeah, luckily that I'm in the lower duplex of a duplex, and my grandmother lives upstairs. And when they renovated, they put this huge tub in, and I was like, thank you
Mm.
so much," because very rarely a person of our heights can fit in tubs.
Mm,
So that's one thing. And the running that I took on just as a form of self-care has really helped with decreasing stress and anxiety and not having to hyper focus on what I did or didn't do. And one of the groups when I do run with people is Black Men Run, and that group was formed for that same reason. And it's not about how fast you can run a mile or whatever. It's just like, oh, you came outside and you're running today and you want a fellowship. Great. And then there's a co-ed version, We Run 313, which was started by Black runners in the community. So those are things I do. As a true Detroiter, I roller skate. I haven't been able to do it the last few months because of the training for this marathon, but now that I'm in a taper phase, I am already plotting on going back to the rink. So those are two physical things I do. I make sure I journal. When I get up and walk my dog, I'll do a affirmation of I am thankful for my breath. I am thankful for my life. I am thankful for where I am today. So those are just practices I do. I shamelessly watch Netflix whenever I can. So the dog is on one end of the sofa and I'm on the other end, or my partner's on one end, I'm on the other end, and we'll just sit and watch TV. I check in with my friends,
mm,
and we hold space for each other and really ask a question. I'm going to ask you 3 times in a series of the conversation, how are you?
mm,
How are you navigating things? Um, and making sure that I surround myself with people who call me in when I am not taking care of myself and not congratulating myself on whatever that may be. And shamelessly being honest as to my lack of capacity, depending on what someone's struggle is. So those are ways that I see it as a conversation with community, but also a way to check in with me too while I'm holding space for someone or vice versa. And being comfortable with asking for someone to hold space with me is another form of self-care that I had to really work hard and really learn.
yeah.
So those are practices for me.
I love it. I love it. Dropping gems. Get your journals out. Put this information in because you just learned a few new ways to practice self care, some different ways to practice self care. So it's not just about going to the gym, getting your nails done, hair did, everything did. It's not just that. It's what
Yeah.
fills my cup. And what
Mhm.
you share talks about the value. It's a value practice that you have. I
Yeah,
love it. I love it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
next question. Out of 40 years of life, what could you say you've learned about people and what you say what you learned about yourself?
Ooh, it's okay to be skeptical when encountering someone. It's
Hmm.
actually quite healthy.
Hmm.
Just because one quote unquote looks good on paper or fits a socially constructed box, you still have a right and a responsibility to let things organically play out.
Hmm.
But also, just because someone represents a social construction does not mean that they're not have your interests at heart either.
Hmm.
So those are like really big lessons I've learned about people. And also, you do learn a lot about a first impression, but there is a such thing as social awkwardness. So you have to allow for a second and third impression too, because that may not be who they are. And so those are so giving people grace has been the biggest lesson, because it reminds me to give myself grace. And another lesson I've learned is I being so grateful to be surrounded by intergenerational exchanges. So I'm just constantly reminded of how lucky I was to have known my great grandparents and my grandparents, because that's not always the case, as well as great aunts and uncles and play cousins and play aunties, because people ask, like, how did I come up with that? And I'm like, oh, it's sitting with my uncle who was smoking a cigarette and shooting the breeze, or the auntie who did everybody's hair while popping gum. Um,
Mm,
so those are just really, really invaluable things. Is just that ability to have just to been, a kid in a chair who got to bear witness to all of that.
mm,
Is just helped shape me in so much, or those encounters with an elder, and I'll probably never see them again, but just that like God avatar that I got from them because they were, a representative of if there is a God, God's love or God's like gem. And so it'll be an encounter with an older person and they'll just, spark a conversation up or just say something very like, whoa, how did you know I was going through something? So just those things have just been so impactful and so great. And of course, just the unsolicited things that have been said to me from students and other people, especially when you're going through an internal struggle and has just been so impactful. So my grandmother asked me recently, do you love where you are and how's life and all that? And I said, life is just so great right now. I said, the value that I have from my connections with people is makes Fort Knox look empty. I said, I'm just waiting on my bank account to catch up. So, so right now, yeah, so at 40, soon to be 42 in November, I've learned that like the connections with others and oneself is so much more valuable than actual fiscal compensation. Mind you, I do like nice things, very nice things,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that has been so valuable and so sustainable because in the moments when I didn't have much, that conversation I had with that person kept me going in whatever I was pursuing, and kept me sustained. So yeah, that's the thing. That's the biggest gem is the connections with others and myself. Has been the thing I've learned the most.
I love it. You just dropping gems. Just being you. Just being authentically you. You don't get no better. Don't get no better. So next question, what would you say is your proudest moment or accomplishment?
Ooh, wow. That's so wild. My friend asked me this. She asked me this not that long ago. I'd say my proudest accomplishment is going on a whim to pursue the things that I absolutely would probably die if I didn't do.
Hmm. More details if you don't mind.
So Toni Morrison said this during a talk. It's actually, I think it's on YouTube, and it was during a book club meeting. It was with Oprah, and she said, she had these exhaustive lists about being a good daughter, being good this, being good that, and then she finally whittled it down to what are the things I could do. If I didn't do them, I would die, either live, metaphorically or whatever death is to oneself. And she only had two things: raise her children and write. And I have always had that instinct to like just keep chipping away at it, and one of it was to read philosophy. And you don't see too many Black folks doing that. And if they do, there you can name them, rather quickly. And just pursuing that and being lost in literature and being lost in art and creative things. And just because I grew up, was born and raised around the way, didn't mean that I had to ascribe to that script. So just being actively rebellious, and that is, I think, is my proudest thing. And now I get rewarded for it. So I think that is my proudest thing for myself. And then what makes me feel proud about it is seeing the reception from younger students, especially of color or other marginalized communities, telling me how much encountering me as a professor or their recommender or whatever has like really given them the permission to pursue the things that will uh, bring joy to them, and dealing with the nuances of the discomfort of working through it. So I think that is my proudest thing.
Love it. I,
Yeah.
and I gotta give you some flowers. I love your answers because you don't just answer the question. You give background. That's why I say you're a great storyteller because it's
Mm,
not just hey, there's the answer. No, it's an experience, and that's
mhm.
one thing I love about this show is we're providing experiences for people from people. This is us, human beings
Yeah.
doing human things. So I love it. And I really appreciate how you express yourself. I love it, all of it.
Thanks.
So
Thanks.
next couple questions and we're gonna get out of here
Sure.
because you're busy. you're a busy man. You got a lot to do. So
Don't
what
we all?
would so what would you say is a word, phrase, memory, or moment that has stuck with you personally and or professionally?
Hmm. Sonia Sanchez taught me this. I was doing a workshop with her. It was a poetry workshop, and she taught us haiku. And one person was getting antsy and irritable, and it's New York City, so everybody's antsy and irritable. And she's like, can we open a window? Because like the air is stagnant here. And she said, no, that's the problem. We don't breathe each other's breath in each
Ooh,
other's air. And I
ooh,
was like, woo.
ooh.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is way before COVID. But I found myself going like, holy crap, she's right. What would it mean for us to truly exchange each other's oxygen and carbon dioxide and monoxide? Like, what would that really mean?
Mm,
How much would that slight discomfort, and as time progresses, we really grow to breathe? And so that was really powerful when she said that. She was like, no, we have to breathe each other's air. And then she did an exercise where we literally placed our hands on the other person's heart.
mm.
Yeah, so
Wow.
those two things, um, those two moments, but especially breathing each other's air, that was
Yeah.
like, whoa. So
Ooh,
yeah, that has
that's
stuck with
powerful.
me.
That's
Yeah.
powerful. Also, what's powerful, again, giving you your flowers. Everybody ain't got access to Sonya Sanchez. Like everybody ain't got access like that. Like that's this
Yeah.
is fam. Like you talking like, yeah, that's me and Sonya. We did project
Yeah,
work
and I
together.
mean, she just celebrated her 90th birthday, and then a couple years later, she came to campus and gave a talk. And she was like, "I remember you," and I was like,
Mm.
"Yeah." So there's a picture of my very 6 foot plus frame and her barely 5 foot frame, my neck giraffing to lean on her shoulder. Yeah, but she is my favorite living poet.
I love it. Oh
Yeah.
man, this is good. This is good. All right, couple more. Now we're finna go back to the basement. Back to the
Hmm.
basement.
Sure.
What's something about you that most people don't know or they wouldn't believe about you?
I think the biggest one is that I had a career in classical ballet. Is probably the biggest shock for most people. They're like, "What?" And then I'm like, and then I show them a photograph, and they're like, "Oh, like you really did that." And I'm like, "Yeah." I think that is the biggest like shock
Yeah.
that people find out is like I trained as a professional dancer until my mid-20s. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. Incredible. I love it. I love it. So now we got into you. We got your information, your background. Now it's time to give of yourself to the listeners. So this last piece is called life work. Life work is very different from homework. Homework, you take it home, you do it, you turn it in, you never remember it again. Life work, you take it home, you do it, your life will change. And you have some life changing information. So if you
Yeah.
were to offer a keepsake to the audience, to the listeners, to the collective, what would you share for them? That's a gift that keeps giving.
Oh, I have to credit my grandmother for this one. And I noticed it, but it wasn't until she really pointed it out. It is literally the sunrise and the sunset. And I realized really what she meant because it is a way in which we mark time, experience, and it reminds us to breathe.
Mhm.
And so I have noticed in markers of my life, it's always been either when the sun is coming out or when the sun is about to set. And so I would say pay more attention to the literal rise and fall of the sun, because I think
Beautiful.
that's something we take for granted as living beings, especially for those of us who have sight. And for
Agreed.
those who don't, we get to feel it on our skin.
Ah, agreed. And what's so amazing, I believe in kinetic energy, and you and I just we've
Yeah.
always had it. My most recent sunrise was
Hmm.
yesterday, watching the sunrise. My recent sunset was Friday because I was on
Mm.
a silent retreat this past weekend,
Oh,
and
wow.
it
Wow.
forced me to slow down and pay attention and exactly what you're sharing. And what I learned was about moments. Everything that we experience is a moment that comes and goes, that's here, then passes. And
Hmm.
that's our life. However many years, however many summers we're here, there's moments, memories, experiences. that all shape who we are and how we view the world. So thank you for sharing you with us.
You're
100%.
welcome.
So if anybody wants to get in contact, anybody wants to get some of your vibes and some of your energy, how can they connect with you?
Well, I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram as golden_seahorse and all the other platforms like Twitter and Facebook. It's my first name, Anwar, last name, Uhuru, ANWARUHURU. And you can just also Google me, and I believe Wayne State University's website will pop up and you'll see my face. And it'll give you an insight as to what I do professionally. So, yeah.
Perfect. Love it. Love it. Anything else you want to offer, you want to share, you want to leave?
I just want to say thank you for this space and place. It's so serendipitous that this interview is taking place now, because this is usually the time of year that I started to reflect on the year because it's weeks away from my birthday. So this was such a beautiful gift for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. You are welcome. And on this show, I also love to give flowers. You are a gem. You are a jewel. You are a true person that I love, respect, appreciate, and admire.
Thank
And who you are and how you live to me is a great example of who we can be as people.
you.
You
Thank
have
you.
it.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. And I'll throw it right back at you.
And I'll take it. I'll take it. I don't mind smelling flowers. I don't mind having them. So thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
100%. So for the listeners, if this episode has shifted you in any way, if anything has come up for you, it's an opportunity for you to do something with it. If this has been impactful for you in any way, don't keep it to yourself. Share the wealth. And this has nothing to do with money. As he said, Fort Knox, empty.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
compared to the connections of the things that bring the most value. So understand what's the value that you're bringing. And 9 times out of 10 is not related to money. Money helps you get to the next place or get the next thing, but it's not about the being. That's why this podcast, in my opinion, is the best podcast ever. In my opinion, is what's important to me. So if you've been tuning in, share it, give it away, do something with it. Don't just feel good for the moment, but share it to give it away. So this concludes our next episode. Again, this is the Three Parallels podcast with your host, Dr. Jason Branch, where we work towards distancing ourselves from who we were, embracing who we actually are, and making room for the better version of us. If this podcast has blessed you, share the wealth. And if you don't, that's on you. Much love. Have a good night. Peace.
Feeling overwhelmed? Searching for someone who truly gets it? At J. Branch and Associates, we provide mental health support for BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and others facing unique challenges. We understand the weight of generational trauma, the struggles of identity, and the pressures of being a part of an underestimated and overlooked group. At J. Branch and Associates, therapy isn't a one-size-fits-all. We create a safe, culturally aware space where you can feel seen, heard, and understood. Finding a therapist who truly fits you matters, and that's exactly what we're here for. Our team of highly trained licensed therapists bring compassion, empathy, and real-world experience to help you on your journey to healing and growth. We're committed to helping you become the best version of yourself. Ready to take the next step? Visit us at www.drjbranch.com for more information, or call or text 404-436-2540 to schedule your free 15-minute consultation. You can also book your first session today. Thank you for choosing J. Branch and Associates, therapists of color providing exceptional care to BIPOC communities, quality service, exceptional care from authentic professionals.